Welcome to episode 47 of Anchored in Education. I'm E. Scott England, and Anchored in Education is the podcast dedicated to all things education. Educators across the world routinely engage in conversations surrounding fundamentals, concepts, and new ideas that improve this great profession. Sometimes we agree, other times we disagree. But at the end of the day, we are all anchored in education. Have you ever felt like time is being wasted? Silly question, I know. Many of you are thinking of a teacher in service right now. And I'll be honest, I can think of a few times when my time has been wasted in teaching. And if I want to be brutally honest, I can reflect back early in my administrative career and probably think of time I wasted of others. It's because we have a finite number of hours in each day. And even at that, we don't have full access to all of them because, well, sleep is required. And we have to get creative in bending time and space because, let's face it, we're limited on space too. So to help out today, I have professional learning guru Allison Rodman. You might remember her from one of the early Anchored in Education episodes in which we talked about her book, Personalized Professional Learning. If you missed that episode, it would be worth checking out to find out how we can create job-embedded pathways for elevating teacher voice. But today, we're talking about bending time and space. Allison, welcome back to Anchored in Education.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be joining you this evening.
Oh my goodness, it is fabulous that you were able to take the time because you're a busy person. You're all over.
Yeah, things have been a little bit crazy, but it's good. It means that we're doing good work.
That's awesome. So we have had the opportunity to get to know a little bit more about your time of being anchored in education. So today I thought we could jump right into today's topic, which is bending time and space. And if I'm not mistaken, we're looking at 5 keys here, which is establish purpose, build safety, share vulnerability, create space, and host well. So before we dive into those a little more, what can you share about the value of bending time and space?
Certainly. So the more that I work with schools and districts, one of the common challenges that continues to come up is that we just don't have enough time to dedicate to professional learning for both teachers and leaders in the way that we want to. So I've been thinking a lot and thought partnering with different leaders in the field to really understand what are some of the ways that we can capture the limited time that we have and make the most of it. And that's where a lot of these concepts are coming from.
Okay, and if I'm not mistaken, you've presented at some pretty big conferences. This exact thing we're talking about today.
That's correct. So the ASCD conference on educational leadership just about a month or so ago, as well as some other statewide conferences, really looking at how do we just do this better together and create cultures where it's not just about kid learning, but it's about adult learning as well.
All right, so let's get into establishing a purpose, which to me is probably the foundation of what we're trying to accomplish. And so when doing this, it's important to remember that clarity, discipline, and consistency all matter. Can you go into more detail for us?
Sure. So one of the things that I was finding as we talk about professional learning is that we would refer to them as categories. So we would talk about, we do this as workshops and we do this when it comes to new teacher induction, but we weren't firmly establishing the purpose of why people were coming, who was in the room, and what we wanted them to get out of the experience. So I've really been working with both leaders and facilitators to try and clarify that purpose so that we understand who are we inviting to these spaces and what do we hope that they gain from them. And then along with that, being very clear and consistent with learners so that the work that we're engaging in doesn't feel like that, one-time flavor of the week type of experience, but instead something that's truly sustained and meaningful throughout a school year or even multiple years.
And you mentioned category. This is where I think a lot of us get confused. That's not a purpose.
No, it's absolutely not. And some of this work comes from Priya Parker's work around the art of gathering, where she talks about, we bring people together. We've got to have a reason for doing it. It can't just be, hey, we've got that new teacher induction meeting on Monday afternoons once a month, or our PLC is going to get together once a week. But why? Why are we there? And what are we hoping to get out of that collaboration together?
Okay. And so next on our list is building safety. And so I think our typical quip to someone relaying information is, hey, don't shoot the messenger. But you would say that the proper response is to hug the messenger for taking the time to provide feedback. Building safety, it's so important. So can you expand on this and give us some ideas and suggestions for building safety in our schools?
One of the things that keeps standing out to me is that as kids, we fall off a bike or we fall off the scooter, and we're not afraid to get back up, to go again, to, keep trying. And as we become adults, that tendency just isn't there. We tend to hide our mistakes. We're not as open with them. And at times we're not willing to reach out for help in the way that we need. So then when individuals come to us with feedback, it's natural for us to get defensive, our back gets up a little bit, and we're not always willing to hear that information in a way that could really move our entire school forward. So one of the things that I've just been working on with leaders is to say, hey, you know what, that messenger is there for a good reason. They're bringing you the information that you need to know.
Yeah.
Welcome them and encourage that type of two-way communication.
And so, a quick pause. For those that are just joining us, we've had you on the podcast talking about your most fabulous book, Personalized Professional Learning, and when we talk about that personalized learning, a lot of times we become defensive in that, and that we're trying to help teachers to improve, and they take it the wrong way. Is that what you're getting at a little bit here with the building safety?
Absolutely. So that communication needs to go both ways. So in the same way the leader might want teachers to improve, when teachers bring that feedback to us as leaders, we need to be open and willing to hear it as well. It's only when we're able to exchange that information back and forth in open and thought-provoking ways that we're able to move forward as a learning organization.
And what some may not realize is how many roles you have played in education, from teacher all the way to your current role of being a board member. And so you've seen the hiring process, and you've seen it at all levels. Let's spend a few minutes covering what you mean by being painstaking in the hiring process, because if I'm not mistaken, this still falls under the building safety.
It does. So one of the things that I think sometimes the private sector can do a little bit better than schools is really being attuned to the culture of a particular building and the way in which individuals flow and work together, and ensuring that the individuals that we're welcoming as a member of our staff not only meet the credentials and the certification requirements, but really align to the mission and the vision that we have for where we want to move all of the learners in our building, both our student learners as well as our adult learners. So when working with leaders, teachers, and even students who are part of those hiring committees, I really encourage them, as you're thinking about that overall culture of learning, to be painstaking, to ask the tough questions, and be really thoughtful about the alignment between the culture that you're trying to build and the individuals that you're welcoming into those spaces.
And whenever you do this presentation, you talk about something that I'm sure that is uncomfortable, but it comes kind of with the territory here, and that is eliminating bad apples. Go into that a little bit, please.
I know, and this is such a tough part of the job at times, but I feel like as leaders, we have a responsibility to do one of two things. Either we need to commit to coaching people up, or if it's not a good fit, we need to coach them out. And that's for the benefit of our students as well as the learning community as a whole. So as tough as that role can be at times, it is a part of the responsibility that we have as leaders if we're going to foster that learning community throughout.
And when we talk about, help them either up or out, out sounds negative, but I mean, really, you're helping all parties involved by doing so, because if you're just not up to par with the culture and everything going on in the school, I mean, everybody's miserable.
That's absolutely right. And someone who may be, not the right fit in one particular school is a great fit in others. So that's something that we need to be aware of as well. Just because it happens to be a 6 to 8 school or a 9 to 12 school doesn't mean that they're all built the same and operate the same. So making sure that alignment is there is a key part of the learning process for everyone.
And we're going to spend I guess a little bit longer on building safety, but I just feel it's so important. There's some things that you can sound like a broken record, but a thank yous is not. How powerful is a thank you, and how can we leverage that to build safety?
So one of the most interesting research studies that I've read over the course of the past year has actually related to that specific topic. And believe it or not, in organizations where coworkers thank one another, they actually perform better. And that was just amazing to me to think about, particularly in our work in education. I work in some schools where individuals pass each other in the hallways and barely make eye contact.
Yes.
And then others where they thank each other for the smallest things. And it truly makes the difference in the way that a school lives and breathes together.
I just tweeted the other night the power of a written note, and this comes in with thank yous, that I got one my first year of teaching, and I still have it. And I mean, and that's what, even making the eye contact, and it's amazing how you walk through some places, and I'm happy to say I'm not talking my school here, but you walk through some and you think, do these people even know each other?
Yeah.
Because there's no interaction, and you can't build safety without interaction.
And it does. It completely shapes the culture of a place. I got an email this morning from a school that I'm partnering with on Friday, and it said nothing more than "thank you for saying yes," and it literally made my day. Things like that do make a difference.
That is awesome. All right, so we've talked a little bit about negative, but some words just sound negative when you say them. And so if I'm going to be honest right here, at least in my opinion, vulnerability is one of those words to me. But one of your 5 keys is sharing vulnerability. So help our listeners, and maybe it's just me, understand this.
Vulnerability is a tough one. As leaders, we feel like we have to have all the answers, or if we don't, we need to at least pretend like we do. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. If anything, we need the courage to be able to reach out to the rest of our staff and say, you know what, I don't have the answers here, and I need your support. Or I've put these pieces together, and here are the areas where I still could, use a thought partner or some other ideas. But sharing that at times can be hard, because we want to appear strong and we want to appear as though we have it together. But in reality, some of our strongest leaders are those who are willing to admit their vulnerability.
You know, one of the most powerful things I realized I could say at a time is I don't know. There has to be a follow up to that, though. As far as inviting somebody to help me find an answer, to let them know that I'm going to research an answer, or I'm going to look more into it. You can't just say I don't know and go on. But
Yeah.
but that's a powerful thing to have in your toolkit to say.
It is, and I think it makes it so much easier for those whom we lead to be able to step forward and say, I need help, and I don't know too. But unless we're willing to model that way as a leader, we can't expect the same of the other people in our building.
So we have had some powerful keys come together thus far, but now we are at creating space. And so you have 4 main ideas behind this that are: exclude purposefully, create anticipation, not coming empty-handed, and setting the stage. So can you paint a picture for us on what this looks like when it all comes together?
Absolutely. So we had, as I said earlier, such limited time and space with educators that I've just been really committed to think about how do we make the most of the time that we have. And the one thing is, first off, excluding purposefully. So our natural inclination is to include everyone in every space, when in reality, sometimes we don't need certain people in certain spaces. And we want to be thoughtful about who attends what sessions and why. The second is creating anticipation before those individuals even step foot through the door. How are we getting them excited about being in that learning space? So it's not just about trudging to another professional development session, but instead really looking forward to the collaboration time that they have together. And with that in mind, we want to create a sense of accountability where they want to engage with others in a way that's thoughtful and intentional, and kind of keeps them on the hook. So I talk with facilitators about making sure that your learners don't come empty-handed. What are some of the things that they can contribute to the learning space and collaboration even before they set foot in the door? What do we expect of them as a learner in that space? And then finally, as a facilitator, we have a responsibility to set the stage. So this shouldn't just feel like an everyday occurrence, but instead almost like an alternate world that our learners are walking into, where it's about deep engagement, thoughtful consideration of our practice, and then careful planning about how these ideas are going to move to the next step towards implementation.
So I want to hit on something that you said. I made a note of. It's creating that anticipation, and then you followed it up with talking about professional learning time, and that you want to get teachers excited for that. And this is, I don't think I'm off base saying that this is kind of your wheelhouse. And I mean, you've got the book we talked about, but a professional learning time is like a time that can absolutely make us become marvelous educators, better than what we already are, or it can absolutely just waste our day.
I keep reading all of these, threads on Twitter about what was your best professional learning and your worst professional learning, and I have to, chuckle at some of them. I've even hosted a Twitter chat myself, on professional learning jokes. What are some of the things that we look back at that just were complete fails? And what comes up time and time again is this idea of just content overload. Not giving educators the opportunity to kind of get messy and collaborate with each other and move those ideas from thoughts to implementation. But then also, in this idea of creating space, really leaving time to move away from the facilitator so that the individuals have an opportunity to dialogue and to partner together, because that's where ideas are going to move from thought to action.
All right, so we'll shift back to what we were talking about. We've made it to host well, and this is the final key to bending time and space. So it may sound simple on the surface, but it is more intricate when you get down to it. So how do we successfully tie this together with hosting well?
It completely baffles me when I, observe professional learning sessions and you have facilitators running around like crazy tending to logistics. So, they're fixing the technology, or they're hunting down chart paper and markers, or arranging furniture, making sure that individuals have power cords. And these are all things that we have an opportunity to outsource or to partner with, other individuals on, so that as a facilitator, when we get to that learning space, we have an opportunity to be a true host, where we're greeting individuals at the door the same way that we might expect them to greet students in their classrooms, where we're listening intently to the conversations, keeping things on track, making sure to move individuals forward. And we're also attuned to some of the roadblocks or the challenges that may bubble up during the course of that dialogue, and able to either redirect or offer resources that can, help move a conversation forward. But the reality is, when you're troubleshooting tech, or you're trying to find dry erase markers at work, you just aren't able to host in the way that you need to. So, that's kind of a final way when I work with facilitators and leaders to think through, all right, you've got this limited time. How do we make the most of it? And it really comes down to freeing up those facilitators to be exemplary hosts.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking that maybe you had a hidden camera on my early admin days, but we're past that. But I do think of Other times that I have been, a participant, not a facilitator, and we're leading up to the time, and the facilitator is nowhere to be found, and they may be doing exactly what you're talking about, chasing around something, but it doesn't set the stage well.
No, it doesn't at all. And, if we're going to really help the individuals in our schools to be constant learners and move forward, we've got to show them that we value that time and we want to make the most of it.
So, Allison, before we go, we've talked about a lot today in preparing educators and schools to be more purposeful and successful. And you've said before, and this intrigues me, sprout speeches, not stump speeches. So can we finish by getting a better idea as to what you mean by this?
Sure. So all too often when we get educators together, particularly when we're gathering cross-building or cross-grade, our natural inclination is to say, okay, go ahead and introduce yourselves. And as educators, we go through the laundry list of experiences that are on our resume. At certain points, I feel like we should just kind of hand a copy of it across the table. But what that unfortunately does is it sometimes puts up this guard where we feel like we have to prove ourselves or we have to have it all together. When in reality, these professional learning spaces should be an opportunity for us to, as we said earlier, share our vulnerability and be willing to kind of strip back the layers and get real with each other. So one of the things that I have been modeling in my sessions and hope that some of the facilitators I've worked with take with them is to help learners share at the beginning of a session their sprout speeches instead of their stump speeches. So why are you here? What do you hope to gain from our collaboration? And where do you really want to grow as a learner yourself?
I just think reflecting on that question can really bring back maybe even that spark on why we're here, why we're sitting in the seat, and why we're driving the education vehicle we're driving is by going back to our sprout speeches.
Yeah, we've got to get back to that why. What gets us out of bed in the morning? What gets us excited about helping kids learn and modeling that constant learning ourselves?
Well, I think that you have given us some wonderful thought today, Allison, and your website that I'm going to link to is thelearningloop.com.
That's correct.
The book that I've referenced multiple times that I'm going to link to again is Personalized Professional Learning, a powerful read, and it's one, in fact, I think I've tweeted about that recently this week as well. So
you have, and I definitely appreciate the support.
Well, it's a wonderful book, and Allison, I know that you are a busy educator out there, but we thank you for taking the time to join us again on Anchored in Education.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
I just love how Allison helps us fill out our toolkit with strategies to become more effective. And you can find Allison on Twitter by searching at The Learning Loop. And you can also read more about Allison as well as find a link to her website and the book we referenced on my website, escottengland.com. Now, before I wrap up today's episode, I'm going to remind you yet again, don't forget to subscribe to Anchored in Education on whatever platform you get your podcast. Now, I wasn't joking when I said that Allison's idea of sprout speeches can remind us why we are in this profession. It is something that is easy to forget. I know I have. But all of us have a why, and it is up to us to cultivate that why as we continue with our years of service. Because by length of service standards, I am only at like the halfway point of my career, and already I have seen what content overload looks like. So, with limited time and limited space, we have to figure out how we can bend what we have to make work what we need. Because at the end of the day, we are all anchored in education.